Welcome back to The Report. Over the last 20 years, evolutionary scientists have promoted the idea that meat-eating dinosaurs like Velociraptor, well, they basically didn't go extinct. No, they just evolved into birds. You heard me right. They suggest that a heavy, ferocious, meat-eating dinosaur evolved into a tiny, lightweight bird that weighs less than a pound by accidental mutations over millions of years. They would say that the tough scales of the dinosaur skin slowly changed into lightweight, aerodynamic feathers. Imagine a dinosaur, which weighs hundreds or even thousands of pounds, flapping those very little short arms and eventually obtaining powered flight, all by accident. Yeah, the whole idea, quite frankly, it seems a little bit ridiculous, but now evolutionary scientists have gone one step further. To bolster their case that dinosaurs evolved into birds, they've reclassified birds as dinosaurs. Yes, you heard me right again. According to evolutionary scientists, a bluebird is a dinosaur. A hummingbird? Oh, it's just a dinosaur. A robin? Oh, you're looking at a dinosaur. You know, the Bible says that those who reject God are fools. Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." So scientists who reject out of hand the possibility that God created birds look pretty foolish with these crazy theories that they've come out with. They're as crazy as Charles Darwin, mental, writing in The Origin of Species that a black bear somehow evolved into a whale. Now, our guest today is Dr. Carl Werner, author of Evolution, the Grand Experiment. Dr. Werner has evidence that dinosaurs didn't evolve into birds. He uncovered this information by interviewing bird evolution experts all over the world at famous bird fossil dig sites like Solnhofen in Germany, the Messel Pit in Germany, and the Green River Formation, which runs all throughout Wyoming and places of Colorado. Now, in addition, he and his wife filmed interviews at 11 dinosaur dig sites like Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, Canada, Cleveland Lloyd Quarry in Utah. His seminal work disproving bird evolution can be found in his book, Evolution, the Grand Experiment, an incredible work which is simple to understand. It is an easy read, and yet it is detailed with a lot of diagrams, a lot of photos. It makes it easy to understand. Dr. Werner, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you and your audience.
It is great to have you back again on the Genesis Science Report. You know, most evolutionary scientists are sure that dinosaurs somehow evolved into birds. This is being taught to paleontology students, but you said that you have solid proof that that didn't happen. What's your proof? Can you tell me?
Solid proof. The first bird to appear in the lowest rock layer is this one. It's called Archaeopteryx. And scientists found a dozen of these fossils in the Jurassic layers in Solnhofen, Germany, where we filmed. Now, Archaeopteryx shows perfectly preserved flight feathers and long arms, which are necessary for flight. But any child seeing a model of this creature would identify it as a bird. The problem for evolution scientists is that there are no dinosaur ancestors in the layer below it. Let me explain. Jurassic would be, let's say, this layer, and this is where Solnhofen is, and this is where Archaeopteryx is found. If evolution is true and birds like Archaeopteryx evolved from a dinosaur, you would expect that in the layers below, you would be able to find the dinosaur that evolved into birds, but they can't find it, and intermediate creatures between a dinosaur slowly changing into the first bird. They have nothing. All they have is the first bird appears, and they have no identification of what animal below it evolved into birds.
So basically, Carl, you're saying that we're missing any transitional forms, the order doesn't appear to match. Your disproof seems pretty simple, and yet it's kind of profound, because science should be all about observation. You should be able to see finely gradated changes happening within the fossil record. Most people had predicted it in the early stages of evolution, and yet here we are today with very little evidence. It's basically a complete rebuttal of the evolutionary claim that dinosaurs evolved into birds.
Yeah, the rule of parsimony in science says that the simplest explanation is usually the correct explanation. And the fact that there's no ancestors below the first bird suggests that birds did not evolve, and that's the end of the discussion.
It should be the end of the discussion, Carl. And we appreciate your work because you are pushing it to where I believe everyone is understanding that there is an insincerity, that there are baked-in assumptions, that there are things that we've never thought about that have simply been accepted as fact within the scientific community, within the paleontological community, within the zoological community. But do you have any other evidence that dinosaurs didn't evolve into birds other than this lack of transition?
Well, actually, I got 8 of them, and I don't know if we're going to have time to do all of them, but let's try. The next evidence is that scientists have been falsely placing scales on the head of Archaeopteryx models to make it look like they had a reptilian scaly head, but scales were never found. You know, we interviewed the top evolution scientist in Germany, Dr. Peter Wellhoner, and he said that the scaly head interpretation of Archaeopteryx is a mistake. They never found scales. They didn't find any feathers on the head either, but the smallest feathers normally are not preserved, he said. So he said, you can't put scales because you did not find either scales or feathers. So really, he believes it should have a feathered head, just like birds do today.
Wow. Okay, so it appears more bird-like in that sense. And yet, aren't they doing the exact same thing with some of the other supposed ape men like Lucy, right? They're putting hair on certain parts, no hair on certain parts, whites of the eyes on models. Well, we didn't find the eyeballs of Lucy. It appears to be that we're simply making things up, drawing these reconstructions based on entirely circumstantial evidence or no evidence at all, and then saying this is the way it is. Share a few more proofs with us.
Okay, scientists have been putting feathers onto dinosaurs to make them look like birds without any evidence. Dave, do you remember the movie Jurassic Park where those 2 kids are getting chased around the stainless steel kitchen by a couple of 6-foot-tall velociraptors? It's one of my favorite movie scenes.
Classic.
And those are velociraptors. Remember what they look like? Now museums are putting feathers onto these dinosaurs, even though no feathers have ever been found on these skeletons. It's all made up.
Okay, so in other words, we're putting feathers onto dinosaurs with no proof of feathers simply because there are potentially feathery appendages or some sort of wispy something on a few other types of creatures in the fossil record. Well then, this must be evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds, so therefore all raptor-type dinosaurs must simply be relatives to birds, so therefore let's just throw feathers on them all.
Yeah, even though you don't have any dinosaur skin impressions showing these feathers and scales as they're interpreting them. They're just making stuff up wherever they don't have evidence.
Okay, let's see if we can get through maybe 1 or 2 more of these proofs that you've been able to track down.
Well, evolution scientists would say this is the most solid evidence in the world that dinosaurs evolved from a meat-eating dinosaur. But Dr. Storrs Olson, who we interviewed from the Smithsonian, he wrote an open letter and said that the idea that birds evolved from a meat-eating theropod dinosaur is a hoax. And he says it's a fantasia, it's propaganda. He does not believe that birds evolved from meat-eating dinosaurs. In fact, evolution scientists can't agree. Was it a dinosaur? Was it an archosaur? And if you can't even decide what animal group evolved into birds, then it seems like this is all conjecture.
You know, you have to remember that there is a massive, Carl, you know more than anyone, that there are massive body plan changes between dinosaurs and birds. And even though there's some speculation that, well, maybe some dinosaurs may have been warm-blooded, well, we know birds as warm-blooded creatures do have quite a few differences from reptilian-like creatures. So there are so many different changes. And a lot of experts are beginning to question this. Can you talk about that for a second?
Well, the scales on a reptile are epidermis. That's the epidermis. It's a layer, the outer layer. We have epidermis, but it's not scaly, But The bird feathers, they came from the dermis layer, which is below. So it's impossible, as the evolution scientists have promoted in high school textbooks, that this reptilian skin somehow evolves into a feather, because it's two different body parts. You can't evolve scaly epidermis into a feathered dermis structure. It's completely false.
You know, Carl, you've done a lot of research on this and actually traveled the world documenting these cases. When you talk to experts around the world who have studied these issues, do they many times admit that, hey, we don't have a lot of understanding of some of these things, that there are assumptions, or is it starkly this is the way it is?
It's really disturbing, because if you go to the museums, their displays suggest this is the way it is, there's no questions. But as soon as you start talking to the experts at the top of the field, they said, no, we don't have evidence for this. We don't know what dinosaur evolved into birds. We don't have feather impressions on this animal. We don't have scaly impressions on this animal. The top scientists say it's a very loose case.
Yeah.
But the people teaching the kids and the museum directors are saying, no, it's solid, you know.
Carl,
but if you want to prove it, just ask someone, well, name the dinosaur below Archaeopteryx. Tell me the name of that dinosaur, because I want to know that evolved into Archaeopteryx, and they will always be silent.
You know, Carl, that's really the problem here, is we don't always have access. Here on the show, we have access to brilliant scientists and thinkers and people like you to break these things down. But the vast majority of the public, they don't have access to the top scientists who are candid about the assumptions. All they're doing is walking through secular museums and learning it's a fact that evolution took place. It's a fact that birds are dinosaurs. It's a fact. And that is where that's where we've really gone astray, and that's where society is learning these things that don't really indicate what real science is showing. Carl, we're completely out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I would love to have you back in the future.
Thank you, David.
Absolutely. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back with viewer voices after the break.